resources, and relationships. Resources and relationships. Parable titles can be helpful until it's not. For example, in today's parable, which is known as the parable of the dishonest steward, also referred to as the parable of the shrewd manager, in fact, the parable is about the rich man, the master, with resources that assisted in building relationships. You see, in Jesus' parables, the first character mentioned in the story is the main character. So the manager is not the focus, but his master. But it doesn't deny the fact that it is quite a difficult parable to navigate through, let alone to interpret. First thing, Jesus never denies wealth and continues to highlight that wealth is a resource that is needed to support life and its relationships. But the difference is how we utilize resources, whether to build and enhance or to break and divide relationships. So our choices, perceptions, motivations, and actions matter. Jesus never shifts from teaching the ways of justice. Let's not miss the point of the parable by bewailing the action of the dishonest steward, like, I'm about to get fired, I'm too old to dig, I'm too proud to beg, I've got it, maybe I'll just do it my way, cheating a little bit. But that's after all that he had done, and after being called out for squandering and mismanaging his master's property. He might have had the gifts and the arts of negotiations, but what counts is motivation, his character, his attitude, and his mindset. However, the rich man wasn't focused on the transactions. He was more interested in connections and the relationships. Being truthful, he called out what wasn't right, mismanaging his property. But then, almost in the same breath, he commended the manager for being shrewd. What happened there? Is that his way of responding for being wronged? Instead of reacting in anger, he responded to injustice with a blessing. Blessing the manager for being shrewd. This man, the master, is showing what it looks like to love your enemies. What it looks like to serve God when it's hard, and treating others as you would like them to treat you, and lending his property without any hope of a return. These are the profound messages of the parable. The question for us, what do we do when we are being wronged? Through this parable, Jesus speaks to us directly that we have a choice. We can have a mindset with motivations to build our own prison of anger and bitterness, a cage for us to live a diminished and pain-filled life. or we choose to respond to injustice with a blessing by forming and building relationships that lead to freedom and new ways of being. That's the way of Jesus, and that is so hard. That's right. It's hard, but it's not impossible, as the master in the parable demonstrated. But the choice is still yours and mine. Reflecting on the connections between resources and relationships, the parable gives us an insight into the manager's motivation. He wasn't trying to elevate himself by taking advantage of others. He did not see the debtors as opportunities to push himself forward. His goal was to make friends so that when unemployed, someone would take him in. That's a window and an insight into the connection between resources and relationships. We ask ourselves, what means do we employ to accomplish good ends? What's our motivation behind the relationships we form or the ones we forge? Are our relationships shaped by societal class systems? How do we share resources justly and equitably? The gap, the difference between the rich and the poor isn't something new that happens only in our time. It was in Jesus' time too. And the poor then were always at the mercy of their rich landlords. What must happen in our lives for us to offer solidarity with the least of these that Jesus so often mentions? We know that resources used wisely empower individuals, empower families and systems and organizations to build and support ethical, strong and safe relationships, emphasizing justice, understanding, inclusivity, free from violence and abuse, where everyone feels accepted and respected, forming caring, loving, and respectful relationships. The Victorian government school resources include a program called Resilience, Rights, and Respectful Relationships, which provides materials for primary and secondary school teachers to develop social and emotional skills in themselves and in the students. It's a great and much needed resource. But that's exactly what Jesus taught through the parables, like today's, teaching social and emotional skills in oral culture setting, with words that hit the mind and cut to the heart, yet allowing one the freedom of choice according to their own understanding. No pressure, just opportunities for transformation of perceptions and freedom of choice. And with a clear message too. To be an empire is to be the emperor of oneself. You're the own boss. For it's not what happens to you that matters, but how you respond to it. Again, that's what the master in the parable showed. Jesus continues to offer new horizons of learning that reshape our perceptions of reality, including the way that we reread and reimagine our biblical texts as meaningful and relevant resources for our journey. The last sentence of the reading is really mind-boggling. You cannot serve God and wealth. Where I grew up, they weren't different. They were the same. God is wealth, because wealth is where I grew up, had nothing to do with money. It was the relationships of people living in families and in communities. So my reading into that is asking us, we cannot serve God and wealth as if they are totally different entities. Put them together, because it's the same attitude that is required to be serving one as well as the other. We are asked to use our resources to serve God in building relationships. The spiritual reality that we seek in our time cannot be achieved without enlightened minds, but it will also never be discovered without discerning hearts. Our mind and heart are our internal engine and resources that drive us to make the life-giving choices with regards to our relationships with God, with one another, with the whole of creation. Resources and relationships. Amen.